Hello? Hello? Hang on a sec. Let me just turn the death metal off. Okay, welcome back to Paint Like Fiend episode 3, more painting. Trying to improve the setup this time. This setup hole here means hopefully the model should actually be in focus the whole way through for a change. Just going to do a little bit more base coating, then do the base. I'm going to try and speed through some bits rather than waffling on too much. So I'm actually going to do some painting and speed up and just show some coverage on a few areas. Obviously I haven't done any work since last time. I will just show a little bit more coverage and then I'll do the whole lot and get back much later on and focus on the base. Okay, so we're going to do the sword a bit more. Do not worry, this will all be sped up. Okay, back down to normal speed now. I hope that was as exciting for you as it was for me. Not at all. So this is taking a few coats on here to get a nice solid green, but I'm trying to keep them quite smooth coats. Yeah, base colour should be really good coverage. This one has taken 4 coats, I think, to get this far. But at the end of it, that is a pretty solid green. Provided basis, I'm going to darken it down and then put some really bright highlights on and make it look all warpy and magical and shit. So this gives you an example of sometimes how much coverage you need, but how you can do that and you can still see the detail is all there because I've kind of kept the coats not very thin down but applied them quite thinly. So next I'll just give a bit of a demonstration of painting some more metallics on, just again to show the coverage and kind of smoothness you should be going for. So I've got Citadel Iron Breaker. I think it's supposed to replace chainmail. Just had a little test of this earlier, so let's see, hopefully this is visible. Just do it over here. It's just testing some coverage here. So this is Iron Breaker and we'll put that on that. That coverage is not super good. Also got some Coat Arms chainmail, which I believe is fairly more equivalent to the Citadel chainmail. Paint that over, and if you can see, the coverage is still quite thin but distinctly better. So I'm going to go for the Coat Arms chainmail, and again I'm not really thinning this down much. It flows, for a thick paint it flows quite nicely. So I can just apply it over like so. This is on the ball and chain, the ball bit. So and that's actually going okay. I think the this sort of grey base coat helps quite a bit with this. See, it's not covering perfectly on the black. I may not even do another coat on that because that'll be right at the bottom. It won't be entirely visible. I'll be doing a wash over it and obviously some more highlighting and shading later on. There is a certain amount of tactics you can use that you don't. Obviously you want a clean, smooth opaque base coat in general. There's areas where you might not necessarily need that. If it's something's going to be very heavily overpainted with highlighting and shading, or if something's at the bottom of something not entirely visible or in the recesses, you can maybe get away with a patchier base coat on the basis that the base coat will either be covered up or won't be that visible anyway. So on this you can see at the bottom, that's clear there, that is not great coverage. At the top where it's like almost a white or grey undercoat, the coverage is pretty nice, so that'll do. One more thing to show on this, when we're mercifully done with all this base coating bollocks, is kind of get part of the aspect of base coating first, and making sure you don't, you can kind of deal with any mistakes. Now, these little areas here, the chains and stuff, very fine details, easy to go over. Now, I haven't fully covered this purple yet, but I will show, hopefully, just using, again, this is a Citadel brush. It's not amazing, but it's good enough for this. Just painting over those. It's kind of quite easy to touch up with the purple at this stage, rather than trying to, when the purple's all highlighted and shaded, touch up later on. But this also gives you an idea that these areas do require a little bit of focus, getting them neat, kind of turning the model around so you can really run alongside these chains here, like so. Getting into the recesses but not all the way in. So there you go, you can see those chains pretty well covered. I've gone a tiny bit onto the purple but not much. So that's a good start for kind of fairly neat painting. Right. Okay, back after doing some base coating. As you can see, the model is taking shape quite nicely actually. Okay, so a few things to go through with colour choices, sort of random orders as I think of them. Right, metals. What I generally tend to do is distinguish metals that are kind of ornate or decorative, like bits around the armour, trim, these little spiky things here, etc. And metals that are more utilitarian, more functional, so things like the chains, the weapons, the what do you call those, caps, steel caps and boots, these kind of blades here. Just I think that accentuates the difference between something that's ornate and something that's functional. It kind of gives a sort of purpose to having two different metals on there, so you're not just slapping them on at random, you're actually choosing where they go specifically. I don't know if this is visible, but I've kind of base coated underneath as well. This is all quite rough under there. Again, it doesn't really matter at the moment. Some of this will be very much in the shadow, some of it simple washing, a bit of shading will cover up any imperfections. I say there's a lot of little mistakes and errors on here. These are okay now because obviously these areas will be fully painted, shaded, and not probably another kind of touch-up base coat, shading, highlighting, details, that sort of thing. But this gets the kind of bulk of the scheme on the model and any kind of really messy work out of the way. Just a thing about contrast, it's good to have some colour contrast on there, obviously that fit the colour scheme, but also to have, this is something I actually found out fairly recently, tonal contrast as well. A good idea is to maybe even photograph your figure, put it on the screen, put it in black and white and see whether it looks, if it's all just like kind of one blob in black and white or whether areas stand out distinctly. Some of the kind of utilitarian, simpler colours on kind of simple areas can help with this. For example, I've got chosen like a dark leather here for the boots, so this distinguishes between the pale cloth and the pale flesh very well. Again, sort of under the shoulder pad here, you've got like the dark leather. Also provides a backdrop for the legs, so they're a kind of different colour, quite a different colour to the rest of the model, being again this dark leather, but they're not too goldy, they're not too contrasting. If they were like a kind of really bright or rich colour, that might be introducing too many colours to an already colourful model. I've also put because I've done these in the leather, I've put the straps in like a pale, I don't know, this would be like a thick cloth or pale leather. Again, so the whole thing is not just one blob at the black, it's got the details are accentuated, providing a bit of contrast. The pouch at the front, that's kind of pale. They're just a simple colour for a simple item. I've also done a little bit of a trick on here. This area where I took the corn symbol off, I wanted to maybe have something where I could paint a Tzeentch symbol on there perhaps. So I wanted it to be turquoise, but I thought turquoise on its own looked a bit strange next to the bulk of the armour, which is turquoise with gold trim. So I just painted the trim on the edges and a bit of highlighting, shading. This should look quite natural, it should match the rest of it well. Similarly with the helmet, again I was going to go for all blue, but I decided to be sort of more harmonious with the rest of the armour. I'll do the kind of, what do you call these, the rings where the horns are set in a gold as well. There's not really a clear distinction on the back. the model for that, but so it's a reasonable recess, so that should work fine. One thing I'm going to do now is just show sort of a bit of I guess sort of blending or preparing for a colour transition in advance. So this mutated arm on here, I'm going to go for quite a bright purple, evoking kind of Tzeentchian horrors, that sort of thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a few transitions on here already, so when I come to do shading and highlighting and accentuate that colour later on, it hopefully should work more naturally. So I'm just going to mix up a bit of Rakarth Flesh, a little bit of whatever the purple this is that I'm going for. I'm going to start painting that on now. So at the moment this is not terribly different to the flesh. You can sort of see it's not too distinct. Where the bicep actually meets, this was actually a fairly severe crease in the model's muscles, so that can be quite an abrupt join there, and that will be the case when I highlight it and shade it later on. But at the back of the model, I'm going to get some paint on the silver chain here. The number of shits I give about that is not very many, because it'll all have to be touched up later. The sort of back of the model here, so just painting it there, that looks already from a distance, it's not too abrupt. Just going to be a quick cut while I wait for this to dry. Okay, and we're back. So I'm going to do another transition this time. I guess the last mixture was about 2/3 Rakarth Flesh, 1/3 purple, so I'm going to go the other way. 2/3 purple, 1/3 Rakarth Flesh. Thereabouts. It's all very approximate. Exact proportions don't matter. What matters is sort of getting a judgment of that. So bringing that purple in there, going sort of almost towards the hand. This paint, this base coat is kind of sloppy because I just want to get on it and show the principle of it. So there we go. You can see that's more purple. Wait for that to dry and we'll be back. And we're back again. I think this is dry enough. So final coat, pure purple, and then hopefully we should see there's already a basic transition there. So getting the purple out, not even thinning it this time, completely casual and sloppy with this, but just trying to demonstrate this. Let's get this so it's actually possibly in shot. Go back into the other purple a bit if needed. So there we go, that already goes from, you look at the back, it's kind of quite subtle, flip it around, and that hand really stands out. Obviously this will be like shaded, maybe being a richer colour. I quite like the way the model is posed, his head's looking down, it's almost like he's looking at that hand, seeing the power of the Tzeentch Lord of Change. Oh look, I got some pink on there, so be it, tidy that up later. These little mistakes happen. In fact, mistakes, they are something I have to deal with quite regularly. I rub paint off my fingers, I kind of go onto other areas when I'm base coating or washing. A few things to deal with that. One thing I like doing is I like using, for like kind of the main areas, I like using simple kind of colours that are easily replicated. So the turquoise is a half mix, very easy to replicate. Rakarth Flesh, or the silvers, the golds, they're just usually stuff that's straight out of the pot. I kind of save the mixing for later on kind of when I'm doing more details and highlighting and stuff. So when I need to cover these areas, when I need to do that again, it's simple to replicate. This mistake here, just Rakarth Flesh straight on it. Other things to do is kind of, say, get the mess out of the way at this stage rather than when you've kind of done a lot of work on individual areas. Paint stuff that's underneath first, at the back first, so you paint these areas, so that means when you're getting the brush in here, mess is going everywhere. That's okay. When you paint the stuff that's close to the outside of the model, you should be able to get the brush easier and more neater onto these areas on the outside and reduce the number of mistakes you make there. So that is pretty much the base coating done. I will probably try and fit in a little bit of the base painting, but not too much. Get on with the real meat of it, which is the proper colours on the model. Okay, back once again for just a little bit of stuff on basing, nothing super detailed here. I've recoated all the aspects of the base apart from the skull. They all needed a little bit of a coat. I've also lightened the coarse gravel here to provide more of a natural transition between the sort of dark grey and the pale sand here. To further that, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this brush. I'm actually just going to wash Nuln Oil, probably slightly thin down over the whole base, and this will kind of bring the colours together a bit more. There's a bit too much contrast here. Plus, it'll fill in the darker gaps and add some depth, as obviously washes do. So, putting some on my palette here, going to need quite a lot of this, thinning it down with pretty much the same amount of water. Yeah. Now, obviously this will produce quite a dull and muted base. It's kind of what we're after for this. I kind of want a backdrop to the model. I want it to look fairly bleak, fairly grey. We can maybe introduce a little bit of colour into it. I mean, we'll be highlighting the base with dry brushing, obviously, as you do on such coarse textures, and put a bit more colour into the dry brushing again. Probably go for some pale sand colours in the highlights overall to unify it. Okay, that's enough noise outside the window, Jesus. And maybe add a little bit of colour to the slaty bits as well later on. So this is just showing how much of a wash and how dilute it should be. Just get it in all the recesses as usual. As you can see already from the colour, it's kind of toned down the sand a bit. Okay, that'd be cool. So with how complicated the texture on the base is, this will probably take a couple hours to dry. So gonna go to the pub maybe, get a few bevies in, and return for some dry brushing and some highlighting later. Okay, I'm back. Base is dry. It's harmonised quite nicely with that Nuln Oil wash on it. So I'm just going to go through a few little concepts for the basing. So obviously the grainy, gravelly stuff can be done very easily by dry brushing. The slaty stuff needs a little bit more detail on it. What I'm actually going to do is going to do a bit of a simple blending first and then dry brush the slate. Dry brush at the very end will bring a little bit of texture to it. I think it's better to do it this way because then you have all of the base looking a little bit gritty and a bit rough, which suits the kind of nature of the material that we use. So this will be very crude and simple, but it should give you an idea. So this is sort of slightly thinned down mid-tone. Just going to put a line on the edge like that. Lick the brush, don't do this at home, just moisten the brush somehow and just feather the edge a bit like that. And this will produce a little bit of a blend on it. You can do it on the other side as well if this is visible. Just a little bit along there. Moisten that a bit and just feather the edge. These paints are quite translucent, so this kind of works okay. It doesn't need to be super neat. It just needs to give a little bit more definition to the stone, a little bit more controlled highlighting shading compared to the dry brushing. Do a bit of dry brushing now, not on that but on another area. So I'm going to go for the mid gravelly areas. I'm actually going to use the same colour that was used to base coat the fine gravel. So just get a bit of that on my brush, dab it on the palette, off shot, bit of tissue paper here, like that. This can be, doesn't have to be super dry for the moment. Just rub it gently across, that'll start to pick up the texture. There you go, you can see that's picking up a little bit. And this will start to harmonise it a bit with the other pale sand. For the pale sand, similar, quickly clean and dry the brush. Bit of bone coloured here. This is quite light. In fact, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to mix this half and half with the tone I just used in the other one, because as you can see, the fine sand darkened down quite a bit. So we put a very bright colour on that, it'll maybe look a little bit rough. So I'm going to go for a half-half mixture. Again, quite dry, quick dry brush over the top. Just kind of picking that up quite nicely, but not too much. And then I'll probably do this same tone lightly over the other bits. Finally, some pure bright bone tone. Just doing this off cam, like so, and then kind of carefully just build it up carefully with that. Well, that's getting quite pale and grey now. So obviously I'll do the rest of the base to match that. Quick one for these here, for the steady ones. I'm going to get a little bit of a pale grey, thin it down, get a tiny bit on. Let's see, run over the edges very briefly like that. That looks a little bit harsh, abrupt for the time being, but what we're also going to do is let that dry, and then I'm going to use the same colour, dry it out, do a dry brush with this. This will have to be a finer, more controlled dry brush because it's on a flat surface, with only a little bit of texture, but we can hopefully bring that out quite well. So just run that across. You can see it's getting a little bit of grain on it, but it already looks, it's already got a good crispness from the bit of blending before. Now it gets a little bit of grain, but not too gritty. And I'll go over like that. It gets a nice edge, contrasts a little bit with the rest of the grain. One more thing I'll probably do on the slate, just to add a little bit of interest to it. Going to get some thin down, show you that on there, a bit of thin down purple wash. Thin that down quite well. So this is not, it's about 1/3 wash, 2/3 water. And I'll probably just put a little bit of that on. Can't really see it, but it will build up a little bit of purple tone there. Add a subtle colour that may sort of tie in with a sort of vaguely magical feel to the rock. So the rest of the base will be done simply using the combination of those techniques.